Morning from Glasgow. I'm going to put Ashna under pressure because this communique has literally just dropped within the last few seconds as we're bringing you the headlines here at Sky News. Is there anything you can give us at this stage, or do you want me to come back to you?
I can give you one point that is a positive so far. So what we were waiting for was the news about the fossil fuel subsidies, whether that was remaining within the text. So in the last literally few seconds, I can read out that, yes, point 36, it is in there. Countries need to accelerate efforts towards the phase-out of unabated coal power and inefficient fossil fuel subsidies, recognising the need for support towards a just transition, I guess, to greener future economies. Okay. That is significant because...
So what does it mean?
So what does that mean? So that means, for the first time in a United Nations document of this kind, it looks as though the fossil fuels and coal, specific terms, remain within this document. Now, it's survived the culling of a number of days now, because they've been going over this draft document over a number of hours, over the last few hours. But there was pressure from countries like Saudi Arabia to take that mention out or water down that language even more. We know countries within the European Union, but also other nations, have been putting pressure on them to make sure that remains in. So the fact that that sticking point of fossil fuel subsidies remains within there is significant.
OK, and I'm guessing Australia had a view on that as well. Anna Thomas-People will be joining us in just a second. Who else wanted it taken out?
Countries like Australia, countries like China, those big economies that rely so heavily on fossil fuels like coal, that some of the biggest polluters in the world now are having to, well, I guess it's written in within this text, this draft text, we need to make that clear, but it is the near final agreement that it looks as though they will need to make some quite strong commitments on phasing these things out. Unabated coal power, of course, means coal that isn't a carbon that's not being offset. So it looks as though at the moment that remains in, but as I say, dropping within the last few seconds.
We have heard from Alok Sharma's special advisor this morning as well.
Yeah, we have. A rather cryptic tweet from Alok Sharma, the UK COP president's advisor, saying, "Is that the sun rising on a COP26 outcome? Hashtag big day, fingers crossed emoji too." How much we can read into that remains to be seen, but a lovely picture of Glasgow.
Well, let's see. Hannah Thomas-Peter is with us. Hi, Hannah, what's your interpretation?
OK, so we've just been cracking through the text, which has just
literally dropped. Top of the hour.
OK, so what I noticed, the first thing that everyone goes to is to try and find this fossil fuel language. Is it still in the text? Yes, it is. And it's unchanged. Now, that's a surprise, because the Brits and America were saying really clearly all the way through, it's not going to survive these negotiations. It was almost a sacrificial lamb. It had been put up in the text in order for other big polluters to fight to take it out so that they might agree to other things.
Okay.
But it's survived the nighttime negotiations. That's really significant, optically in particular. I think John Kerry...
And what's your interpretation of that? Because we're just hearing from Ashna that you said people like Saudi Arabia or Australia wanted it to be taken out. Why were they so desperate to get rid of it?
Well, because it specified the ending of unabated coal use and inefficient fossil fuel subsidies. And it wasn't so much about the precise wording, but just crossing a threshold of actually having a mention of fossil fuels in a COP text. This is the first time it's ever happened, as mad as that sounds.
Wow.
That's why it's so precedent-setting, and that is why the UK and the US and others who have got ambitious carbon reduction targets will see that as a huge win if it stays, because this might not be the final version. Just looking at other things that remained, there has been no change to the language around adaptation finance. So obviously there's been an agreement, that's the amount of money available for poorer countries to adapt to the changes that are already happening.
So just to clarify on that, it was $100 billion a year. They were supposed to be reaching that by 2021. Then they said it would get to 2023, then maybe 2026. Where are we with that?
So that's there. The 100 billion is there. It is going to get there by 2023. The poorer countries have been very cross about it, think of it as a betrayal, but there's nothing that can, I don't think that countries are going to get there any sooner than 2023, and that actually hasn't been on the table. The adaptation piece of that 100 billion, this is all very technical, but actually to poorer nations, it really matters, is how much of that 100 billion and whatever else the rest of the world provides, how much of that is available for things like moving communities away from rising sea levels, better protecting critical infrastructure, nothing to do with reducing carbon emissions, but keeping people and economies safe. And it's the countries that had the least to spend on that stuff and did least to cause the climate crisis who have been so desperate for the proper amounts of funding to keep themselves safe and not only to survive but to thrive. So that adaptation language is still there. It calls on developed nations to at least double their adaptation finance. The next bit, and this is the other really critical bit that the UK in particular was really fighting to keep, is that it calls on all countries who've signed the Paris Agreement to come back with more ambitious carbon reduction targets by the end of next year. That's much sooner than 2025, which was the previous agreement. Now, it's that bit of the whole text that the UK and others believe will close the gap between what has been promised and what is necessary to keep 1.5 within reach, which is the overarching aim of this whole summit. So that's also a big win.
So the two big questions are, is it something that will get over the line? Will all sides agree to it? And if so, is it enough to keep 1.5 alive?
Simon Steele, who is the climate minister for Grenada and a central voice at COP, has been in all the rooms. He stood next to Barack Obama when they did their photo op, because kind of central figure, told me yesterday that this text, as it stands, is just about enough to keep 1.5 within reach. If it's weakened any further, he said, it won't be, but it's like right on the line, it's bare minimum, he said. So my interpretation, having just seen the text, is that it is the same, if not slightly stronger, as it was yesterday. And therefore, COP will be able to say, if this text survives through the next 12 hours or so, that 1.5 has been kept within reach. The other thing to say that was causing real trouble in negotiating rooms yesterday was the loss and damage piece of this, which is a separate bit of, of funding. And that is that poorer nations have said for a long time that they deserve repayment for climate disasters, that the loss and damage that they have suffered historically as a result of a climate crisis that they did not cause needs to be addressed. Now, America in particular has been very resistant to being on the hook for an open-ended amount of money. But poorer nations have said it's central to our agreement here. We will not give you our agreement, we'll withhold it if you don't address loss and damage. Now, what hasn't happened in this text is there's a kind of grand plan to start shelling out cash to small or vulnerable nations who've been really hit hard by hurricanes. But it's opened the door to further discussions, which is all those nations were asking for.
OK, ladies, my goodness, it's literally just dropped. I've properly put you on the spot, and of course you delivered with aplomb. We'll speak to you both again very shortly. Thank you very much indeed. Thanks a lot.